Sometimes, family isn't bound by blood. It's bound by greed, ambition, and the silent expectations we carry for years. My family was no different. My grandmother, Eleanor Vance, was a fierce, unstoppable woman who single-handedly built a multi-million-dollar real estate empire from scratch. Over 40 years, a small plot grew into Vance Enterprises, a vast network of commercial hubs and developments. She was respected by peers, feared by competitors, and quietly resented by her own children. Today was the day we gathered in her grand, dimly lit study for the official reading of her last will and testament. The air was thick with the scent of old leather books, polished mahogany, and desperation. Eleanor had passed away 5 days prior, and before her body was even buried, the whispers about her massive estate had already begun. Her 3 children stood around the massive desk like vultures. First, my father, Arthur, the eldest son, who believed he was the rightful heir simply because of his birth order. He viewed people purely as assets or liabilities. Next to him stood my aunt, Victoria, smooth-talking and accustomed to a life of high luxury funded by grandmother's generosity. And then there was my uncle, Julian, a chronic gambler who viewed Eleanor's passing not as a tragedy, but as a financial bailout for his mounting debts. And then there was me. I was the only grandchild Eleanor seemed to tolerate. While the others visited only when they needed funds, I spent my childhood summers with her at the old family farmhouse in Meadowbrook. She taught me how to read blueprints, evaluate land, and read people. True wealth isn't recorded in a bank balance, my boy, she used to tell me. True wealth is written in character, foresight, and patience. None of the others understood that. They looked at me with cold, condescending eyes as I sat quietly in the back corner of the room. To my father, I was a disappointment. To my aunt and uncle, I was just extra clutter in the room who shouldn't get a single penny. The heavy double doors of the study creaked open, breaking the silence. In walked Mr. Harrison, my grandmother's lifelong attorney. He was an elderly man with sharp gray eyes, carrying a battered leather briefcase. He didn't smile or offer fake condolences. He simply placed the briefcase on the desk, sat down, and adjusted his spectacles. "We are gathered here today, Mr. Harrison began, to read the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance. Her decisions are final, binding, and legally unassailable." My father cleared his throat impatiently. "We know the legalities, Harrison. Just read the terms. Who gets the primary stake in Vance Enterprises?" Mr. Harrison gave my father a long look before opening the folder. He read the standard clauses, minor jewelry and charity donations. Aunt Victoria received an antique diamond collection, though she scowled when she realized no liquid cash was attached to it. Uncle Julian was granted a fixed monthly allowance, heavily restricted by a trust fund so he couldn't gamble it away. He slammed his fist on the armrest, muttering curses under his breath. Regarding the primary shares of Vance Enterprises, Mr. Harrison continued, Eleanor has instructed that business operations be placed under a joint voting board consisting of Arthur and Victoria, with corporate dividends divided among the 3 children. My father stood up, a smug smile spreading across his face. I knew it. She knew I was the only one capable of running the firm. "Sit down, Arthur," Mr. Harrison said calmly, turning a page. "I haven't finished." My father paused, his expression hardening as he slowly sank back into his chair. "To my grandchild," Mr. Harrison read, looking directly at me, "I leave the sole ownership, land title, and full rights to the original Crest farmhouse and 40 acres of rural land in Meadowbrook." A snort of laughter erupted from my father. "The old farmhouse? It's a dilapidated piece of junk. The roof is falling in. She gave you a heap of dirt, son." Aunt Victoria chuckled, shaking her head. "Well, at least he has a place to live if his little architectural projects fail." I remained silent. To me, that place was sacred. But as I looked at Mr. Harrison, I noticed something strange. He wasn't closing the folder. His hands were hovering over his open briefcase. "Is that everything?" my father asked, already standing up. "I have a company to restructure," It is not complete, Mr. Harrison said, his voice dropping an octave. The room went dead silent again. Mr. Harrison reached into his briefcase and pulled out a heavy white envelope, thick and sealed tight with a dark red wax stamp bearing my grandmother's initials. Before her passing, Mr. Harrison explained, Eleanor gave me strict instructions. This envelope was only to be produced after the initial will was read. It contains a secondary codicil. My father's eyes narrowed instantly. A codicil? Does it alter the corporate shares? That, Mr. Harrison replied, can only be determined by opening it. He picked up a sleek silver letter opener. The sound of paper tearing open echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Harrison pulled out a sheet of parchment paper and a small, delicate brass key attached to a dark blue ribbon. Read it, my father demanded. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and read my grandmother's final words aloud. Asterisk to those sitting in this room. You have spent your lives measuring my worth by what you could inherit. You saw my company, my houses, and my bank accounts, but you never saw the foundation upon which they were built. The primary shares of Vance Enterprises are subject to a singular condition. The small brass key enclosed belongs to a locked iron chest hidden within the Meadowbrook farmhouse. Asterisk. Everyone turned their heads to look at me. The smugness on my father's face evaporated. Inside that chest, the letter continued, asterisk, lies the master deed and original land titles to the industrial park where Vance Enterprises headquarters, factories, and commercial hubs stand. 30 years ago, I purchased that land under a private land trust. Whosoever holds the physical master deed inside that chest holds total legal ownership of the land beneath the company. Asterisk. Silence stretched across the room. The brass key and the right to locate this chest are granted exclusively to my grandchild. Mr. Harrison read firmly. Asterisk. If any member of this family attempts to coerce or force their way onto the Meadowbrook property before he opens the chest alone, the land rights will automatically transfer to a public trust, shutting down Vance Enterprises forever. You have 24 hours. Asterisk. The room exploded into chaos. This is insane, my father shouted, slamming both hands on the desk. She was out of her mind. That land belongs to the corporation. Arthur, quiet down, Aunt Victoria shrieked, turning to me with a sudden, sickeningly sweet smile. Darling, we're family. We can go to the farmhouse together right now. I can help you search. Sell me the key, kid. Uncle Julian interjected desperately. I'll give you a percentage. They turned on each other instantly, shouting and arguing. They were like wild animals fighting over a carcass. Mr. Harrison quietly picked up the brass key, walked past my screaming relatives, and handed it directly to me. She trusted you for a reason, Mr. Harrison whispered. Don't let them follow you. Drive to Meadowbrook now. I closed my hand tight around the cold brass key, slipped it into my pocket, and walked out without saying a single word. Behind me, I could hear my father screaming my name, but the heavy oak doors shut, cutting off the noise. The rain was pouring heavily as I stepped out. I got into my car and drove through the dark roads toward Meadowbrook. My mind was racing. Grandmother wasn't just entertaining a young child during those summers. She was preparing me. She always emphasized that the safest place to hide something valuable was in plain sight. When I pulled up the muddy driveway, the old farmhouse looked dark against the stormy sky. I grabbed a flashlight, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The house smelled of cedar, old paper, and rain. I started searching frantically. First, her second-floor study behind bookshelves, under rugs, and inside the old wall safe. Nothing. Next, the damp basement, tool racks, stacked firewood, wine cellar. Hours passed. My hands were covered in dust, but there was no sign of an iron chest. It was 3 a.m. Exhausted, I sat down on the bench in the old kitchen, feeling a wave of defeat. Then, I looked at the floorboards near the central hearth. I remembered a specific afternoon when I was 10 years old. I dropped a marble and grandmother pulled me away, warning me never to step heavily on the brass rivets near the hearth. I dropped to my knees and shone the flashlight beam beside the stove. There were 3 small circular brass rivets embedded in the oak wood. I pushed down on the center rivet hard. Asterisk click. Asterisk. A rectangular section of the floorboard popped up. Beneath it, resting in a stone-lined cavity, was a heavy, rusted iron chest. I pulled out the brass key and inserted it into the lock. Asterisk clack. Asterisk. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside lay a stack of pristine parchment documents tied with gold string, alongside a small handwritten letter addressed to me. I opened the letter. Asterisk, my dear grandchild, you looked where others were too blind to see. The documents beneath this letter are the original titles to the land beneath every major facility Vance Enterprises operates on. My children believe power comes from titles and corporate boards. They forgot that without the ground beneath their feet, their empire is nothing. You now hold the power to dictate the future of this family. Build a legacy of character. Asterisk. Just then, screeching tires echoed outside. Bright headlights flashed through the window. They had arrived. I quickly placed the master deeds into my leather satchel, locked the floorboard, and walked out onto the front porch. 3 car doors slammed shut. My father, Aunt Victoria, and Uncle Julian marched up the muddy pathway, soaked and desperate. Give me the key, my father shouted. Whatever is in that house belongs to us. I stepped onto the porch, holding my satchel tight. You're too late, father. Grandmother didn't leave me money. She left me the land. Every factory, every office building Vance Enterprises sits on belongs to me. As of tonight, I am your landlord. My father's face drained of color. Aunt Victoria gasped, staggering back. The company will continue to operate, I added, but under new terms. You will answer to a new board and you will report to me. Now, get off my land. Without another word, my aunt turned back in tears. Uncle Julian followed silently. My father stood on the stairs for a long moment, looking at me in shock, before hanging his head low and walking back into the rain. I watched their taillights disappear down the dark road. I walked back inside the warm, quiet farmhouse and held my grandmother's letter. I didn't feel cruel revenge. I felt a profound sense of peace. She had given me the power to protect her legacy, ensuring that character, integrity, and foresight would finally rule the empire she built. And it all started with that simple, secret envelope.